The title of Duke of Rothesay and the other Scottish titles which I've had the honour to carry for so long, I now pass to Catherine.
The question shaking royal watchers is not whether Prince William will one day be king. Everyone knows that. The real question is why his future suddenly feels closer. A reported private document, King Charles III's signature, and the pressure around succession have created one uncomfortable mystery. Is the monarchy simply preparing, or is something deeper being protected? For many viewers, this story begins with a dramatic claim that King Charles III has signed a sensitive document connected to Prince William, the Prince of Wales, and his future role inside the British royal family. Buckingham Palace has not publicly confirmed any secret transfer of power, and there has been no official announcement that the king is stepping aside. But the claim has traveled quickly because it touches a question people were already asking. Every sign involving Charles and William now seems to carry meaning. That is where this becomes larger than one headline. Succession is the royal subject everyone understands, but few people like to discuss too directly. It is written into monarchy, yet it is tied to family, age, health, loss, and duty. For the public, William's future may look like history moving forward. But for the family itself, it is far more personal. A father must prepare his son for a role that can only fully arrive when his reign has ended. That emotional truth gives this reported document its power, whether the claims are accurate or not. But why now? That is the question royal watchers keep returning to. Charles spent decades preparing for the crown under Queen Elizabeth II. He knows that a future monarch cannot be created overnight. Briefings, public discipline, constitutional knowledge, and the confidence to carry national symbolism all take years to develop. So, if William is being prepared more visibly, some will call it responsible planning. Others will wonder whether the timing points to a more sensitive concern behind palace doors. This is the tension the palace must manage carefully. If William is seen too little, critics may ask whether the future is being neglected. If he is seen too much, the public may ask whether authority is quietly shifting. The king remains sovereign, but the Prince of Wales is no longer merely waiting in the background. He is becoming, in the eyes of many viewers, the visible shape of what comes next. And that change can be felt in the way people now read royal images. When Charles and William appear together, people do not simply see father and son. They see the present and the future standing side by side. When William takes on a serious engagement, it is examined for signs of readiness. When Catherine, Princess of Wales, appears beside him, viewers are seeing a possible future king and queen consort, with Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis behind them as the next chapter of continuity. That family image is powerful, especially for older royal viewers who have watched the monarchy move through decades of change. It reassures people because it suggests stability. But it also raises another question. Is the public being gently prepared to think about William's reign before anyone inside the palace is ready to say so openly? This is why the word document matters so much. A document sounds official. A signature sounds final. A private file suggests something serious enough to be kept from public view. It creates the feeling that somewhere behind palace doors, decisions may be taking shape before the nation understands them. Yet royal history shows that major shifts are not always announced first. They appear through patterns, adjusted duties, and choreography. Still, there is danger in reading every gesture as proof of a hidden plan. Responsible preparation does not mean abdication. More visibility for William does not mean Charles has been replaced. A future king learning the weight of duty does not mean the current king has lost authority. But monarchy depends on confidence, and confidence is shaped not only by what is true, but by what people believe they are seeing. Once viewers sense a shift, even an ordinary adjustment can feel like part of a larger story. For Charles, this must be an unusually difficult position. He waited a lifetime to become king, and his reign deserves to be understood on its own terms. Yet, as monarch, one responsibility is to make sure the institution continues beyond him. That means preparing William without making his own reign look temporary, and sharing responsibility without appearing weakened. For William, The burden is just as complicated. He must appear ready, but never eager. He must support his father, but never overshadow him. He must accept that the crown is his destiny, while protecting his own family from being swallowed by that destiny too soon. If reports about deeper preparation are accurate, the future he has always known about may now be pressing closer. That is what makes this story feel intimate beneath the constitutional language. It is not only about state papers, advisors, or palace planning. It is about trust between generations. Can a father prepare his son without making the preparation feel like a farewell? Can a son step closer to duty without feeling that every step carries the shadow of loss? And for the wider monarchy, another layer waits beneath the surface. Once William's future becomes the focus, Queen Camilla, Catherine, and even the distance surrounding Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, and Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, all begin to look different. Loyalty, duty, and family unity suddenly matter even more. So the mystery is not simply whether a private document exists exactly as claimed. The deeper mystery is why the claim feels believable right now. Why are viewers so ready to imagine that the monarchy is preparing William more seriously? Why does every conversation about Charles now seem to lead, sooner or later, to the future king waiting behind him? For now, the crown has not changed hands. Charles remains king. William remains heir. But the public conversation has shifted. When people stop asking only what the monarch is doing today and begin asking what the heir is being prepared to do tomorrow, the monarchy has entered a more sensitive phase. And to understand why this moment may matter more than the palace is willing to say, we have to look at what royal preparation really means when it moves from private duty into public suspicion. That private duty is where the story begins to sharpen, because royal preparation is never only about one person learning. It changes the atmosphere around those close to the throne. It changes who is listened to, whose diary carries new weight, and which royal figure begins to look less like support and more like the center of the next chapter. For years, William's role was easy for the public to understand. He was the loyal heir, the steady son, the husband and father who represented continuity without carrying the full burden of the crown. But if reports and royal commentary are correct that his preparation has become more serious behind the scenes, then the meaning of his role begins to shift. He is no longer simply waiting for history. He is being measured by it. And that raises a delicate question. Who decides when an heir is ready? In monarchy, readiness is not announced with one statement. It is built through access, expectation, and trust. A future king learns how to speak for the institution without becoming the institution too early. The public sees the balcony, the carriage, the solemn walk into a cathedral. What it does not see is the discipline required to make those images feel calm. That unseen training matters because the crown is not only symbolic. It sits beside government, national identity, public grief, celebration, and crisis. When something serious happens, people still look toward the monarch for steadiness. One day, they will look toward William in that same way. So the question is not whether preparation should happen. It must happen. The tension is whether the public is beginning to notice it before the palace is ready to explain it. And once the public notices, the story changes. Every engagement begins to carry a second meaning. A speech is no longer only a speech. A photograph of Charles and William together becomes a study in distance, posture, timing, and trust. Royal viewers begin asking whether the king is simply being supported, or whether the future is being allowed to stand closer beside him. That is where the palace has very little room for error. If Charles appears alone too often, people may ask whether the burden is too heavy. If William appears beside him too often, others may ask whether a quiet transition is being staged. If Catherine is present, the image becomes reassuring but also prophetic because people see the shape of a future reign. If Queen Camilla stands beside the king, the message is loyalty to the present. Each image tells a different story, even when no one says a word. This is why older royal audiences are so sensitive to small details. They have watched enough royal history to know that the palace rarely explains change before it has already begun. Royal roles are introduced, adjusted, softened, and strengthened over time. The monarchy moves through choreography first and language second. So, when the public senses a pattern, it may not wait for confirmation. But here is the complication. Preparation can look like pressure, even when it is meant to create stability. For Charles, allowing William to grow into more visible responsibility may be wise, but it also risks creating a painful comparison. The king is still reigning, still serving, still carrying the crown. Yet the public naturally gives attention to the next generation because the future always creates curiosity. That does not mean people are rejecting Charles. It means they are trying to understand what comes next. For William, the danger is different. If he appears too prepared, critics may call him ambitious. If he appears too cautious, others may wonder whether he is ready. If he is serious, they may call him burdened. If he is warm, they may call him polished for kingship. Almost every part of his public life can be interpreted through succession. Catherine's role deepens this tension because she gives William's future a human face. The public does not imagine him as a solitary king. It imagines a household, William and Catherine at the center, George learning slowly, Charlotte and Louis growing up within the same inheritance of duty and scrutiny. That family image reassures viewers, but it also reminds them that royal preparation is not confined to one man. Was this really about one reported signature, or about a family being drawn closer to history? That question matters because the emotional center of this story is not paperwork. It is timing. If Charles prepares William too late, the monarchy risks uncertainty. If he prepares him too early, the family risks living under the shadow of a future no one wants to rush. This is the burden monarchy places on fathers and sons. They must discuss tomorrow while trying not to make today feel like an ending. Camilla's position also becomes more sensitive. She has spent years helping Charles establish his reign after a lifetime of scrutiny. Any suggestion that William's future is moving closer may reassure some viewers, but to others it can feel like the public is already looking beyond the king. And then there is the wider royal family. The absence of Prince Harry and Meghan from frontline royal life means the working monarchy appears smaller and more dependent on those who remain. That places greater symbolic weight on William and Catherine. It also makes continuity feel less like a broad family system and more like a narrow bridge leading from Charles to William to George. That narrow bridge is both powerful and fragile. It gives the monarchy clarity. The line is visible. The future is easy to understand. But it also means any pressure on the king, the heir, or the Wales family feels bigger. When viewers see fewer central figures carrying more duty, they become more alert to signs of strain. A missed appearance, a careful statement, or a stronger role for William can quickly become part of a larger theory. This is how public suspicion grows, not always from evidence, but from atmosphere. The palace may know the difference between ordinary planning and dramatic change. Advisors may understand what is procedural, what is symbolic, and what is speculative. But viewers see patterns. They hear reports. They compare images. They ask whether the royal household is telling the whole story or only the part it believes the public can safely absorb. The reported document matters because it has become a symbol of hidden preparation. It may not prove the most dramatic claims. It may not mean Charles is stepping aside. It may not mark any secret transfer of power. But it has exposed a real anxiety that the future of the monarchy is being shaped in private while the public is being asked to trust the silence. For some, that silence feels dignified. For others, it feels evasive. And for many longtime royal viewers, it creates one urgent question. If William is being prepared more deeply, who inside the palace is guiding that process? Because behind the visible story of father, son, and succession, another force was beginning to come into view. The quiet influence of those who may not wear the crown, but understand how power moves around it. If that quiet influence was beginning to matter, then the story was no longer only about Charles and William. It was about the people around the crown who understand a difficult truth. Monarchy is personal in public, but institutional in private. A king may wear the crown, and an heir may carry the future, yet the path between them is shaped by advisors, family voices, household officials, and rules most viewers never see. This is where the reported document becomes more interesting as a symbol. Buckingham Palace has not publicly confirmed the dramatic claims surrounding it, and it remains unverified whether any secret paper exists, in the way some headlines have suggested. But the idea works because it points toward a real pressure. Behind every calm palace image, there is a system designed to prevent confusion before confusion reaches the public. And the question is this: who inside that system would be most concerned about William being ready? The obvious answer is Charles. But the deeper answer may involve the institution itself. The monarch is never just a father making private decisions for his son. He is also the center of a structure that must remain stable through illness, absence, crisis, and scrutiny. If royal commentators are right that the palace has become more focused on continuity, then the motive may not be fear. It may be discipline. Fear creates panic. Discipline creates planning. And in the royal world, planning can look cold from the outside because it deals with emotional realities in practical language. A father thinks about his son. An advisor thinks about procedure. A courtier thinks about timing. A communications team thinks about how the story will look if one detail escapes too early. All may be looking at the same future, but each sees a different danger. For the king, the danger is appearing weakened. For William, it is appearing impatient. For the household, it is appearing unprepared. And for the public, the danger is feeling that something important is being hidden. That is why senior royal figures matter in this story. Princess Anne has long been viewed by many observers as one of the family's clearest examples of duty without performance. She represents discipline, steadiness, and the old belief that service continues even when the personal cost is heavy. If someone like Anne is part of the wider conversation around continuity, the focus would likely be practical rather than sentimental. But was this about personal loyalty, or was the institution quietly protecting itself? That question is uncomfortable because monarchy turns family into service. A son becomes an heir. A wife becomes a future queen consort. A child becomes a symbol of national continuity before he fully understands the burden. In that world, love and responsibility are never entirely separate. William's position is therefore more fragile than it may appear. The public often sees him as steady and ready. But readiness in royal life is not only about experience. It is about knowing how to hold silence when people demand answers, how to reassure a country without revealing too much, and how to carry family pressure without allowing it to disturb the institution. Those skills are learned under years of observation. And pressure has been building from more than one direction. The royal family has faced health concerns, reduced numbers of working royals, strained relationships, and a media environment that no longer waits politely for palace confirmation. Now, silence creates headlines. A missing detail becomes a theory. A cautious statement becomes a clue. A private adjustment becomes the beginning of a transition in public imagination. That is why William's preparation cannot be treated as a private matter only. It affects the entire royal household. If his role expands, staff may begin to look toward him differently. Journalists may compare his tone with Charles's. Supporters may feel reassured. Critics may ask whether the palace is managing public feeling before admitting how much has changed. And somewhere inside that tension sits Camilla. Her role is not to compete with the future. It is to strengthen the present reign. But the more the public focuses on William and Catherine, the more carefully the palace must protect the image of Charles as an active sovereign. For Camilla, standing beside the king is not only support. In a family built on symbols, her presence is also a message that the current reign remains central. Catherine's message is different. She represents the future that feels familiar and comforting to many viewers. Her popularity gives William's eventual reign emotional warmth. Yet that warmth can also speed up public curiosity. The more people trust the Wales family, the more easily they imagine them at the center. And the more easily they imagine them at the center, the more pressure rises around Charles's present role. This is the contradiction the palace must handle with extraordinary care. A popular heir is an asset, but an overly anticipated heir can become a shadow over the monarch. A trusted future queen is a strength, but too much focus on the future household can make the current reign feel temporary. No one inside the royal system would need to say that openly for the problem to exist. It is enough that the public begins to sense it. Some royal watchers believe this is why any real preparation for William would have to be serious, but carefully managed. Not because preparation is improper, but because premature visibility could distort its meaning. If the palace openly discussed every step, headlines might turn planning into crisis. If it said nothing, speculation would fill the silence. There is no perfect answer, only a choice between different risks. That may explain why this story has taken hold so strongly. It sits at the meeting point between fact, fear, and imagination. The confirmed fact is that William is the heir. The public fear is that the monarchy may be under more pressure than it admits. The imagination is the image of a signed paper quietly moving him closer to destiny. Whether that image is literal or symbolic, it has revealed something the palace cannot easily undo. People are now watching for signs of internal alignment. Is Charles preparing William with confidence? Is Catherine becoming more central to the future image? Are senior figures helping steady the present while the next chapter forms behind it? These questions grow because monarchy is built on delayed revelation. The public rarely sees the decision when it is made. It sees the consequence later, dressed in ceremony, softened by protocol, and presented as tradition. But by then, the real shift may already have happened. And that is where the story moves into its most sensitive territory. Because if the public is only now noticing that William may be moving closer to the center, the deeper question is whether someone inside the royal world understood this long before the headlines appeared. To understand why this moment may matter so much, we have to look at the one development that changed the entire direction of the story. That development was not necessarily a signature, a sealed file, or one dramatic palace moment. It was something far harder for Buckingham Palace to control. The public began looking at William differently. Not simply as the next man in the line of succession, but as the person many already expect to steady the monarchy when uncertainty appears. And once that happened, the story moved beyond private preparation. Because the moment viewers start seeing the heir as a source of reassurance, every royal decision begins to carry a heavier meaning. A joint appearance with Charles is no longer just father and son fulfilling duty. It becomes a message about continuity. A serious speech from William is no longer only a public engagement. It becomes a test of future kingship. Even a quiet family image with Catherine can begin to feel like a preview of the monarchy still to come. That is the turning point royal households fear most. Not the moment something changes officially, but the moment the public starts behaving as though change has already begun. Buckingham Palace has not publicly confirmed the more dramatic claims about a secret document, and it remains important not to treat speculation as fact. But royal perception does not always wait for confirmation. If enough people begin to believe that William is being prepared more urgently, then every palace statement must work harder. Every appearance must be balanced more carefully. Every image of Charles and his heir must reassure without accidentally suggesting replacement. That creates a serious pressure around the king himself. Charles has spent his reign trying to show steadiness, service, and continuity after the long era of Queen Elizabeth. He cannot allow the monarchy to look uncertain, but he also cannot ignore the future. If he keeps William too far back, the institution may appear unprepared. If he brings him too close, the public may wonder whether something more serious is happening behind closed doors. Neither path is simple, and both carry risk. This is where the emotional and institutional consequences begin to meet. For Charles, trust becomes the central issue. Trusting William with greater visibility does not weaken the king in a constitutional sense. But symbolically, it requires a monarch to share the stage with the man who represents life after his reign. That is a deeply personal act, even when it is dressed in protocol. A king can sign papers, approve duties, and manage schedules, but he cannot fully control how the country feels when it sees the future standing beside him. And the country is watching closely. For an older royal audience, especially those who remember the careful dignity of earlier reigns, the smallest shift can feel significant. They understand that monarchy is built through patterns. A new seating arrangement, a more prominent role at a solemn event, a change in who speaks first, a photograph where the heir appears not behind the monarch but beside him. These details may seem minor to casual viewers, but to longtime royal watchers, they can suggest that the palace is preparing the public eye before it prepares the public explanation. That is why the presence of Catherine becomes so powerful in this part of the story. Catherine does not need to make a political statement to affect the meaning of William's future. Her calm public image, her role as mother to the next generation, and the affection many viewers feel toward her all strengthen the sense that the future monarchy has a familiar face. When she appears beside William, the story is no longer only about succession. It becomes about stability, marriage, family, and reassurance at a time when the royal household has often seemed under strain. But that reassurance can cut both ways. To supporters, William and Catherine represent the monarchy's strongest long-term asset. To critics, their growing importance may make Charles's reign appear like a bridge rather than a destination. That may be unfair, but public feeling is rarely fair. It moves through emotion, memory, and comparison. Once viewers begin imagining the next reign more vividly than the current one, the palace has to work carefully to protect both the king's authority and the heir's promise. That balance is even more urgent because the working royal family feels smaller than it once did. With Harry and Meghan outside the frontline royal structure, and with fewer central figures carrying more visible responsibility, the monarchy has less room for weakness. William and Catherine are not simply popular members of the family. They are increasingly seen as the future structure, holding the institution together. That makes every conversation about William's preparation more consequential, because it is not only about one prince. It is about the weight placed on an entire household. And if reports of deeper preparation are even partly accurate, the consequences may already be unfolding quietly. Not in the form of a public handover, not through an announcement from a palace balcony, but through the slow reordering of attention. Advisors may become more aware of William's long-term importance. The press may begin framing his actions with greater seriousness. Public expectations may rise. Supporters may look to him for reassurance during moments when the king's own schedule draws scrutiny. These are subtle shifts, but they can change the atmosphere around a reign. This is where the monarchy faces its most difficult communication challenge. If the palace says nothing, speculation continues. If it says too much, it may turn normal preparation into a bigger story. If it denies everything too strongly, people may wonder why the denial was necessary. If it allows the conversation to run, the public may decide for itself that a transition is already taking shape. In every direction, silence and explanation both carry danger. So the strongest strategy may not be words at all. It may be imagery. A carefully chosen appearance by Charles and William can say what a statement cannot. It can show unity without explaining private arrangements. It can show the king still leading, with the Prince of Wales supporting rather than replacing him. It can remind viewers that preparation does not mean surrender, and that continuity does not have to look like crisis. But even that kind of image must be handled with precision, because the same picture can be read in two completely different ways. To one viewer, Charles standing beside William says the monarchy is stable. To another, it says the future is moving closer. To one viewer, Catherine's presence says the family remains united. To another, it says the next reign is already becoming the emotional center of the story. That is the risk of royal symbolism. It reassures and unsettles at the same time. Some royal commentators believe this is why the reported document has struck such a nerve. It may be unconfirmed in its most dramatic form, but it gives the public a simple image for a complex fear. The image is not just of a king signing something. It is of a monarchy quietly admitting that tomorrow must be prepared today. And that is a serious idea. Because once preparation becomes visible, it changes how loyalty is understood. Are senior figures rallying around Charles? Or are they also preparing William? Are household decisions designed to protect the present reign or secure the next one? Is the palace calming public concern or managing a future it knows will come sooner or later? None of these questions prove a secret plan, but they show how quickly royal duty can become royal interpretation. For William, This escalation may be the hardest part. He cannot ask the public to stop seeing him as the future king. He cannot pretend his destiny does not exist. But he must avoid becoming a symbol of impatience. His strength must appear as loyalty. His readiness must appear as service. His growing authority must be framed as support for the king, not pressure upon him. That is a narrow path, and every step matters. The strongest turning point, then, may not be what was reportedly written on any private paper. It may be the public realization that William's future is no longer distant enough to ignore. The monarchy can continue to insist that Charles is sovereign, and that is true. But the emotional attention of the public has started to stretch forward toward the man who will one day inherit everything Charles now carries. That shift does not end the story. It makes it more serious. Because if the palace can turn this moment into a message of unity, Charles's reign may be strengthened by William's preparation. But if the public begins to see preparation as quiet replacement, then even responsible planning could become a source of suspicion. The difference between those two interpretations may decide how this entire moment is remembered. And that is where the final part of the story becomes impossible to ignore, because the real consequence is not only what people think happened behind palace doors. It is what this moment reveals about the future Charles is protecting, the burden William is accepting, and the monarchy Britain may soon be asked to imagine more clearly than ever before. And that future may be the real reason this story has unsettled so many people. Not because the crown has changed hands, and not because Buckingham Palace has confirmed the most dramatic claims surrounding a private document. It has not. But because the public has been reminded that monarchy is always living in two timelines at once, the reign that exists today and the reign that is being prepared quietly for tomorrow. That is the deeper meaning behind this entire conversation. For Charles, the task is not only to reign, but to make sure the institution remains steady after him. That responsibility belongs to every sovereign, but in his case, it carries a sharper emotional edge. He waited so long to become king that any discussion of what comes next can feel almost unfair, as though history is already looking over his shoulder before his own reign has fully settled. Yet the crown does not allow a monarch to think only of the present. It demands that the future be secured even when speaking of the future feels personally painful. For William, the burden is different. He is not being asked merely to wait. He is being asked to become ready in full view of a public that studies him more closely with each passing year. The future monarch must show steadiness without looking eager, authority without appearing distant, and loyalty without being swallowed by his father's reign. That is a difficult balance for any heir, but it becomes far more delicate when public attention begins moving toward him before the palace has clearly framed what that movement means. And this is where the story stops being about paperwork and becomes about trust. Does the public trust the palace to prepare responsibly without explaining every detail? Does the palace trust the public enough to show William's growth without fear of misinterpretation? And does the royal family trust itself to manage transition as a shared duty rather than a quiet source of tension? Those questions matter because the monarchy survives not only through tradition, but through confidence. People need to believe that the king is leading. They also need to believe that the heir is ready. If either image weakens, uncertainty begins to grow. The danger is not that normal preparation happens. The danger is that preparation becomes wrapped in secrecy, speculation, and competing interpretations until no one is quite sure what they are seeing. Some royal watchers will look at this moment and see wisdom. They will say that Charles is doing what a responsible sovereign must do, making sure William is prepared long before a crisis forces the issue. From that view, the reported discussion around a document, even if unconfirmed, reflects the serious nature of monarchy. The crown cannot wait until the last moment. It must plan calmly, privately, and with discipline. Others will see something more unsettling. They will wonder whether the palace is carefully managing a future it does not want to discuss too openly. They will ask whether William's growing visibility is simply natural evolution, or whether it is part of a more deliberate effort to make the public comfortable with him as the center of the next chapter. Neither interpretation can be accepted as fact without confirmation, but both reveal how sensitive the atmosphere has become. That sensitivity may define the coming years. Royal observers will be watching for the details that once seemed ordinary. How often does William stand beside the king at major national moments? How often does Catherine appear in ways that strengthen the image of the future royal household? How does Camilla's role continue to protect the dignity and centrality of the present reign? And how does the palace speak about continuity without making people feel that something has already begun behind closed doors? These may sound like small details, but in monarchy, small details often carry the heaviest meaning. A royal family does not need to announce a new era for the public to sense that one is forming. It happens gradually, through repeated images, careful choices, and the slow movement of attention. One day, people are watching the heir as a supporting figure. Then, almost without noticing when the change occurred, they begin watching him as the person who may one day have to steady the whole institution. That is the transformation now surrounding William. He is still the heir. Charles is still the king. But the emotional distance between the present crown and the future crown feels smaller than it once did. That does not mean the king has been replaced. It means the public imagination has begun moving forward, and once that happens, the monarchy must guide that imagination carefully. The final lesson of this story is not that a secret document has changed everything. The strongest claims remain unconfirmed, and responsible royal commentary must acknowledge that. The real lesson is that the idea of such a document became believable because people already sense a transition in mood, expectation, and symbolism. The story gained power because it gave a dramatic shape to a quieter truth. William's future is no longer distant background. It is becoming part of how people understand the monarchy today. And that may be the most important consequence of all. For Charles, William's readiness can strengthen the reign if it is presented as service, not replacement. For William, preparation can become an act of loyalty if it is framed as support for his father, not impatience for the crown. For Catherine, the future image of monarchy may depend on offering warmth and steadiness at a time when the institution needs both. And for the public, the challenge is to separate dramatic claims from the deeper reality beneath them. Because the monarchy is not simply asking people to watch a royal family. It is asking them to believe in continuity.
So what do you think?
Was this simply one reported royal development turned into a larger public debate? Or does it point to a deeper shift in how the monarchy is preparing for Prince William's future? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of royal question that longtime viewers see from more than one side. And as this story closes, stay with us for the next royal video, because another development is already raising fresh questions about power, loyalty, and the future of the crown. In the end, the most revealing royal moments are not always the ones announced loudly, but the quiet ones that show where history may be moving next.